All right, friends, here we go. So we are going to talk about freedom and the meaning of life for the next few weeks. And last week in your Google form, when I asked you about whether you'd like to learn about nihilism, existentialism, or absurdism, most students said they'd like to learn about existentialism and absurdism, respectively. So this week, we're going to do a dive into existentialism and the major theorists, and then next week we will talk about absurdism, okay? So here we go. Let's get started. The first thing that you should know is that we are going to study one big name in the field of existentialism. He's going to be kind of our anchor. This is not the only theorist in existentialism, and not all existentialists agree and think the same things, okay? But if you need to know one name associated with the existential ideology, it's going to be Jean-Paul Sartre, who was a French existential philosopher, okay? So you need to know this guy's name, all right? Jean-Paul Sartre argued that there was no human nature, only a human condition, and that human condition, right, is that we are condemned to be free, and therefore infinitely responsible for our own destinies. This sounds a little bit like the Stoics to me. I don't know if you're making that connection at all, but this idea that like we can't control what's outside of us, only what we do with it, etc., etc. To say that there is no human nature is just a little bit problematic, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But let's explore this human condition thing. Let's see what he has to say. Maybe there's some value that we can pull out before we reject him outright, okay? So what does he have to say about this human nature, okay? Well, he says that we have a nature that desires something to anchor us. But when we realize that there is nothing to anchor us, what we experience is this existential angst. And I talked about this a little bit in last week's video, but I want to dive into a little bit here, because existential angst is an actual feeling. It is a sickness. He describes it as a nausea in his own writing. When we realize that there are no absolutes, there's no God. For Sartre, not all existentialists are atheists, but Sartre is. So he says there's no God. And because there's no God, there's no soul, and there's no essential meaning or purpose to life. There's no reason for us being here. We are just kind of here. And when we realize that, we have no way of defining ourselves, but we want to define ourselves because we're meaning-making creatures. But we have no way, no frame of reference, no context within which to understand who we are or what the meaning of our life is. And so that makes us feel utterly and completely alone. We feel abandoned, and we feel like there's nothing upon which we can put our feet that is stable, okay? And it makes us feel sick, okay? When we have this moment of realization of our aloneness in a meaningless universe, it starts to make us feel ill, okay? So it's not stress, it's not panic, it's not paranoia, it's not neuroses. It's something else. It's a sickness that we feel when we realize there is no ultimate meaning for our lives and while we're here, okay? But he has a solution for that. He's like, listen, that's okay. Because this gives you the opportunity to create your actual identity. Because existentialists reject the idea of an essential self, that fixed identity. Remember those theories that we studied at the beginning of the year, those essentialists? Anyone who believes that we have a soul or some kind of essential nature, Plato thought we had an essential nature. Hinduism argues that we have Atman, right? We have that pocket Brahman within us. We have that piece of the divine inside of us, that essential identity. Many religions, right? Christianity, Islam also believe that there's a soul in there, that there is something that makes us who we are. An existentialist is going to argue no. No, absolutely not. Rejects the essential identity. There is no such thing as a fixed identity. Instead, though, what you have is the opportunity to create your own identity. You literally construct the who that you are. Okay, so your identity is defined by how you change and grow and develop throughout your lives. Now, you're going to change and grow and develop, and sometimes that's going to be because you're pinging around like a pinball in a machine, okay, and everything else is kind of telling you where to go. Or for Sartre, you grab onto your life and you guide it and you direct it. Sounds a little like Plato's chariot, but hey, okay, he's not an essentialist, but there is this idea that like we are responsible for our own lives. And this is really heavy, and this can kind of make us feel sick as well, because it's like, oh, well, I had a bad childhood, so blah, blah, blah. No. Well, coronavirus is happening, so I'm having a real hard time. No. Okay. Well, I woke up with a headache, so I'm having a bad day. No. I don't get to go to my class and teach anymore, so I don't know who I am. No. Okay. No, no. It's my responsibility. If I have a bad day, my bad. Okay, if I get angry really easily, on me. Got to fix that. Okay, if I am sad, depressed, angry, whatever, on me. Okay, that's all on me, according to Sartre. All right, that it is my responsibility to make myself, and if I start finger pointing, all right, Sartre's got some terminology for that too. Sartre really doesn't want us to finger point to people, to circumstances, to past experiences. They happened, they were real, but they do not have to affect who we are unless we let them. And that would be a weakness for us, according to Sartre. Okay. Sartre's theory is called radical freedom. Okay. And it has two parts. He thinks that this radical freedom is dual in nature. Okay. That we have freedom of mind and freedom of action. He thinks that we are unique in our condition. Humans can imagine the future. Unlike any other species, right? We can dream of a future, we can imagine a future, we can figure out a future that we want to inhabit for ourselves. That's freedom of mind. And we have freedom of action. We can inhabit that future. We can make choices and take steps toward the future that we imagine. So we imagine what it can be, and then we can make it happen. And again, we can make ourselves into who we want to be. That is ultimately our freedom and our responsibility. And he argues that we absolutely 100% have the capacity to do it. Now, let's pause for a minute before we go any further, right? If you are a smart, savvy kid and you've paid attention all year, you're asking yourself, and you're like, Ms. Venable, this is bogus, because what about everything we learned about biological determinism? Okay, all that stuff that you taught us at the beginning of the year about the things that human beings are kind of born with. We're not hardwired. We're like rough drafts. We constantly change. Neuroplasticity is real. Things change throughout our lives. You know, evolution is a theory based on the flexibility and adaptability of human beings. So don't think that you aren't changing every day, every moment. You are. But, right, this idea of like, well, I'm born with stuff, right? And if I'm a victim of like childhood trauma, there are some psychological things that are going on in there. And what about all that stuff in the unconscious that Miss Tuttle taught me about, and all of that stuff in my psyche? What about the language I speak and how that affects who I am? Didn't Miss Lewis talk about linguistic determinism? What if I'm broke, yo? What if I have absolutely no money and I live in a country that, you know, strips my rights away because I'm a woman, or because I'm gay, or because I'm a person of color, etc., etc.? What about all that? Okay, good critique, good critique. You're smart. I've taught you well, okay? Sartre concedes that there is this thing called givenness, okay? That the circumstances of your birth are obviously outside of your control. And fun fact, Confucius would call this your destiny, which I love. I love that Confucius, that woke dude, right, is like, the things that are outside of your control are your destiny, which puts the destiny in the past and the present, but not the future. And I think when us, you know, Americans think about destiny, we think about, oh, it is my destiny, it is my future, you know. I blame pop culture for this. I blame movies, you know. It is your destiny. Confucius is like, nah, man, your destiny already happened, is happening. Miss Venable, you white, you a lady, okay? Outside of your control. Sartre would call this your givenness, okay? Sartre would call this your givenness. The circumstances of your birth that are 100% outside your control. Okay, so maybe biological determinism and linguistic determinism and socioeconomic and, like, you know, different types of issues and, you know, oppression, systemic oppression, maybe that's included in givenness, okay? So he makes that concession, he does. But he also argues that we can transcend that. We can transcend this givenness, and we can shape our identity through our actions. Whether you agree with that or not, something to think about. Can everyone transcend their givenness? Does everyone have the fortitude and capacity to transcend their givenness? Does everyone want to? I don't know. Just, you know, some stuff to think about, okay? And then any choice we make that is not authentic and radically free, if we make choices because you know, this is what it means to be a good person, or this is what my mom wants me to do, or this is what my culture expects of me, or this is what it means to be a girl or a boy or a this or a that. And so I make these choices, okay? My family came to the United States so that I could be a doctor. Listen, I'm here for that. I celebrate it. But, right? If we ever make choices that don't stem from our radical freedom, Sartre says these are choices that are made in bad faith. This is the finger pointing. He's like, listen, we make a lot of excuses and justify our bad decisions, but we always have choices even when it seems like we do not. Ms. Venable, bull, okay? I don't get to choose whether or not I go to school today, whether I stay at home, whether I'm quarantined with my family. Okay, yeah, but you have other choices, Sartre would say. It's like maybe you're focusing on the wrong choice, right? If you focus on the choice that you feel has been taken away from you, what other choices are you ignoring? Okay? You do have choices, okay? And even if we could go to school, you could choose to not go to school. Oh, Ms. Venable, the law makes me go to school. No, it doesn't. The law provides a consequence if you don't go to school. But the law doesn't make you go to school. You make yourself go to school. You thereby do not receive the consequence of not going to school. But the consequence, if you're only going to school to avoid the consequence, that's bad faith. If you're only going to school to avoid the consequence, that's bad faith, according to Sartre. Because you're not going to school because you want to go to school. You're going to school to appease the entities that force you to go to school. Do you get me what I'm saying? Okay? So bad faith is when human beings under pressure from social forces adopt false values and disown their innate freedom, and they act inauthentically. And for Sartre, this is the worst, right? Because you'll live your whole life playing a bunch of roles, okay? If you're in my English class, think True West. Think some of the stuff in the thing around your neck, okay? Yeah? You'll end up playing a bunch of roles all of your life instead of knowing what it actually is that lights you up inside, right? That lights your, he would not say soul because he does not believe in one. I'm going to use the word soul because I'm an English teacher and I think it's poetic and I think it's beautiful. But what lights your soul on fire, right? He would want you to find that, and he would want you to pursue that. And anything else, you'd have to eliminate. Okay. So what do you think? Okay. What do you think? Is radical freedom viable? What are some of the implications of radical freedom, right? What's the fallout? If we accepted this belief as true, could it get chaotic? What about the social order? What about the implications, of other people around us? He would always say that, like there would be kind of a social order. I didn't really get to talk about that, but the idea that you would just get to like run around and like hurt people and harm people, like no, like that's not okay. He would argue that that's inauthentic, right? Because that's not good for you. Okay. Anyway, what are its limitations? What are its merits? And then what is it I'm mostly concerned with? What does it feel like to be ultimately responsible for everything that you do? How does that make you feel? Does that like stress you out? Does it make you nervous? Does it make you excited for the opportunity? I'm curious. So give it a go. You're going to answer some questions in your Google form, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye.